It is an extremely famous wine growing region and its wines have been copied all around the world. Bordeaux was one of the first places I focused on when I started learning about wine as a young sommelier, and the region's classification system really helped me make sense of it all. In particular, the classification of 1855 was a key to the success of Bordeaux's wines, as the 5 levels in the classification make it easy for consumers to decide which wines to buy. It was drawn up for the Paris Universal Exhibition in 1855. The Bordeaux brokers categorized the 60 leading chateaux from the Médoc, including one from Gravieres, this one, Chateau Haut-Brion, and the sweet wine producers from Sauterne and Barsac. The ranking was based on the market prices the producers fetched, and there were only 2 major changes to the list. The first one was in 1856 when Chateau Cantemerle was added to the list, and the second one was in 1973 when Mouton Rothschild was upgraded from second growth to first growth. No new wineries were added to the list, and the 1855 classification was never updated, but of course many things have changed over the last centuries. In a way, the power of the classification system is that it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The producers included in the list gained in reputation and were able to charge more for their wine, generating income that they were able to reinvest into their production, therefore increasing the quality of their wines and justifying why they were included in the classification in the first place. Many argue that it's time to revisit the ranking, and today I want to see whether lesser wineries are able to play in the same league as the expensive classed growth. I'm going to blind taste Leon's selection from Bordeaux. One of them is an expensive class growth, and the other ones are much cheaper alternatives. Either they are not classified or they are classified in another less prestigious system. So will I be able to find value in Bordeaux, and am I going to identify the 1855 Grand Cru Classé? Let's find out. When it comes to Bordeaux, quite a lot of attention goes to the 1855 Grand Cru Classé, but there are 5 classification systems in total. There's also the Cru Classé de Graves, the Grand Cru Classé de Saint-Emilion, the Cru Bourgeoise, and the Crus Artisans. They're all more or less relevant and they follow different rules and regulations. But yeah, still the 1855 classification system is the big one, the one everyone learns about first. All right, let's taste wine number 1. All of them will be red wines. All of them will be made using a Bordeaux cuvée. Well, there could be something from Pomerol here, just using Merlot. The red Bordeaux cuvée consists of 6 different grape varieties. First of all, there's Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. Those are the big ones. And then there is Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot, and Carmenère. And there are other grape varieties that you can plant as well. But now let's dive into wine number 1. A pretty dark purple red wine. This looks still pretty young. There's no browning towards the rim. So it looks like a recent vintage. Bordeaux is obviously a wine that is able to age. I mean, the best Bordeauxs, they can age for decades. And I've tasted some of those examples here on the channel. So this smells nice. I mean, it smells of blackberries and cassis, a little bit of elderberries as well. Pretty precise. There's not a lot of oak here. So this already points for me away from the Grand Cru Classé, because most of them are really made using quite a lot of new oak. And when the wine is young, this oak flavor usually shows. So this feels kind of, a little bit more restrained, a little lighter. On the palate, this first impression is confirmed. This is quite light, fresh, linear. The tannins are grippy. Cabernet Sauvignon tends to have really intense tannins, and you can feel quite a bit of that grip. It's fresh and long. It doesn't have a lot of concentration on the mid palate. So for me, this right now feels a little bit more like a Cabernet Sauvignon based blend, or a wine with a heavy share of Cabernet Sauvignon, but not one that is super expensive, but it's really enjoyable. I mean, this is fresh, fruity, lively, pretty well made. I'm going to rate this 88 points. I think it is very good, but it's not great. I don't think this is a Grand Cru Classé. I think this is enjoyable, fruity, lively, but it lacks a little bit of depth and concentration. So let's move on to wine number 2. All right, again, quite dark in color, concentrated. Cabernet Sauvignon is a grape variety that adds quite a lot of color to the wines. Concentrated Merlots also tend to be quite rich, but it's not as dark in color. A Merlot isn't as dark in color as Cabernet Sauvignon. This looks dark, but it also looks a little bit brownish. So this might be a little more aged than the previous example. But yeah, let's taste it first. Whew, this is quite a bit more concentrated and rich. There you can smell a little bit of oak, but it's quite well integrated. I mean, there's lots of ripe fruit flavor as well. You have crème de cassis, blackberry fruit. You also have a little bit of tobacco leaf and leathery notes, which are pretty typical for left bank Bordeaux. So Bordeaux from the Médoc or Pessac-Leognan, wines that are dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon. Yeah, this is definitely complex and rich, and I think this is quite delicious on the nose, but let's taste it first. This has a great texture, quite a lot of body and concentration. The tannins are a little bit more mellow than what I would have expected. But yeah, this is a big and concentrated wine. Now the tannins come through a little bit more. Oftentimes it's definitely good to retaste a red wine to really analyze the tannins. I often find them far less pronounced in the beginning than when I retaste the wine and try it again, just kind of swirl it around. And here the tannins come out quite a bit more. But yeah, it has great balance, great concentration. So this is definitely a pretty high quality wine. So I'm going to rate this 94 points. It doesn't have quite the complexity, structure and intensity that I would expect from a wine above 95 points, but it's really well made. And this could be the class growth. It definitely could be, but I need to taste the other ones before I make my final decision. All right, let's move on to wine number 3. For all of the ones who keep reminding me that I poured a wine into a glass where there was still some of the previous wine inside. I mean, this might have happened, but usually I kind of rinse out the wine and then kind of pour the next wine inside. So in this case, I already put a little sip into the glass, swirled it out, and now I got the new wine in there. So this again is quite dark in color, dark ruby, and towards the rim it's still kind of bright colored, probably a younger wine, not an aged wine at least. On the nose this is also young and fresh. There's blackberry jam, cassis, black currants, which is what you make cassis or crème de cassis of, and a little bit of spice, but yeah, this feels quite young. On the palate this is concentrated and rich, juicy, quite balanced. I really like this. This is kind of really invigorating. This is not a heavy wine that pulls you down. This is actually kind of, it's a lot of fun. This is quite a delicious wine, and I'm thinking this might be based more heavily on Merlot. I'm guessing that this is a cuvée, but it feels a little more velvety and round and rich. So Merlot really has those characteristics, and it's quite nice. Yeah, I'm going to rate this 91 points. I think it's just a delicious, juicy, approachable wine. It doesn't quite have the same depth as the previous wine did, but it's really enjoyable. Next, we have wine number 4. This is dark ruby, a little bit of brown towards the rim, and this looks quite cloudy. It doesn't look like it was filtered, which isn't a bad thing at all. I mean, filtration removes all of the loose particles swimming around in the wine, but it also strips out a little bit of flavor. So sometimes it's just better to keep it all in there. But yeah, some people just don't like the look of it, but oftentimes the flavor is actually better. All right, this smells a little bit natural, not in a bad way, but it smells like there was very little or no sulfur used in the winemaking. And the fruit flavor, therefore, isn't as pristine. It's not as bright and clear. It's a little bit, yeah, it feels a little bit like it's fresh fruit, but fresh fruit that was left out for a little too long, you know? It still tastes good, but it tastes a little bit funky. On the palate, this is really intense. The tannins are very present. It Tastes a little bit of iron, so a little bit bloody, meaty. The acidity is pretty good. This is just different, but it's very well made. This definitely tastes a little bit hands-off, but if the winemaker knows what he or she is doing, hands-off can actually be beneficial, or at least adds an interesting element to the wine. So do I smell a little bit of bread? Brettanomyces, this farmyardy flavor. I think I do, but it's just a little bit, and I'm actually pro bread as long as it's just a touch. I do like this country air flavor, but in tiny doses, and I think here it's just the right amount. So I'm going to rate this 93 points. I think it's an excellent wine, but it's not necessarily for someone who likes classic Bordeaux. This is more the new wave, old school kind of winemaking. So just let it rip a little bit. But yeah, I think this is excellent. All right, wine number 5. All right, here we go. Wine number 5, and that looks again pretty dark and pretty young. This is quite ripe, intense, fruit forward, quite nice. This smells of ripe cherries, cream. There's also a little bit of spice there. So blueberries even. On the palate, this feels rich and concentrated and a bit alcoholic. 14.5% I would guess, which isn't a rarity in Bordeaux anymore, especially on the right bank in Saint-Emilion, for example. Wines often have 14.5%, 15% alcohol. And even in the Médoc or Pessac-Leognan, where it was kind of the standard that wines tend to have 12.5% alcohol, the red wines become more and more rich and concentrated, and 13.5 is kind of the new norm. But it's well made. It's not a refreshing, light little red wine, but I think lots of people really like this, and I think it shows quite a lot of balance. There's a bit of chocolate powder there as well, which adds complexity. So I do think this is quite nice, but I think this is probably majority Merlot, in my opinion. That's what it tastes like. So I'm going to rate this 92 points. I think delicious wine, a little bit one-dimensional, but yeah, really, really nice. Let's go. Wine number 6, the last wine in the lineup. Dark color, really dark color, quite concentrated. Nice lifted flavors. So this actually smells quite delicious. So this smells of cherries, red currants. There's also blackberry flavor there. Quite a bit of spice. So I definitely can detect some oak influence here, but it's not super pronounced. It's quite well integrated. On the palate, this is really grippy and intense. You can certainly feel the tannins on your palate. So this feels more Cabernet Sauvignon heavy, but it's a delicious wine. I really like this style. I'm going to rate this 93 points. This is quite delicious. It actually feels the youngest out of all of them. I'm guessing this is 2020, but I think it has quite a lot of potential still. So the tannins are still really grippy, but this is not a wine that is made for early consumption. This feels like it's really something that you should keep on your shelf for another 10 years. And then it will be absolutely delicious. I know people hate hearing this, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just better to keep your wine for a bit and drink it in the future and enjoy it then. But yeah, everyone is just kind of looking for instant gratification, and that's just not how Bordeaux works. Or that's not how the wine world works. Let's go Bordeaux. Well, that was pretty terrible. But anyways, I tasted 6 wines, and they pretty much all were delicious. Really good stuff. I mean, wine number 1 was subpar out in this lineup, but it was still a very nice wine. But everything else was pretty much on the same level, which kind of raises the question, which one was the Grand Cru Classé? Because if I rated them all on the same level and the prices are so different, is it really justified? Should you really pay up for a Grand Cru Classé, or can you find great value in other spots in Bordeaux? And I guess the answer is already, yeah, you can find great value in other places. I don't know the prices for all of those wines, but we'll soon find out. So let's just start unwrapping those bottles. But first of all, this was my highest rated wine, but I actually really loved wine number 6 and wine number 3. Really wines that I would enjoy for different reasons, but I think this is the Grand Cru Classé, and it's the most high quality wine, but just by 1 point. But now let's start unpacking. So wine number 1 I thought was quite nice, but I rated it 88 points if I remember correctly, and yeah, it was the worst scoring wine in the lineup, but still a nice little red. So, okay. So this is the 2020 Le Carmes Haut-Brion. This is from Pessac-Leognan, and yeah, it's kind of a well-known winery. Correction, this is actually Le C des Carmes Haut-Brion. So this is the second wine, but still, I mean, a little bit disappointing. It retails for 30 to 35 US dollars. And at that price point, it's okay, but it's not great. So let's move on to wine number 2. I thought this was the best wine in the lineup, and I thought this was the Grand Cru Classé. So let's find out whether I was right. I was right. It's Rauzan-Segla. Here it says Grand Cru Classé en 1855. I think it's a second growth, so a deuxième Cru Classé. And it's a pretty well-known winery from Margaux in the Médoc. This is actually the 2017 vintage. I was saying that it looked a little bit aged. This certainly isn't old at all, but yeah, it's a little bit more aged than all of the other ones, I think. The winery is owned by Chanel, which kind of makes sense. I mean, Chanel is a luxury brand, and this has become a luxury brand as well. The wine retails for around about 100 US dollars. So it's definitely not cheap, quite a bit more expensive than this one. And I'm guessing quite a bit more expensive than all of the other ones. But it's still not a super expensive wine when it comes to Grand Cru Classé Bordeaux. So let's move on to wine number 3, which I quite liked. I just didn't think it has the same complexity as this one. Did I actually say that I liked wine number 3 the most earlier? I think what I actually meant was wine number 4 and wine number 6. But anyways, let's unwrap this. This was delicious, a really good wine. Not the top wine in the lineup, but a pretty good example. All right, Chateau Marjosse, Grand Vin de Bordeaux. This is actually an estate owned by Pierre Lurton, which is one of the most iconic winemakers in Bordeaux. And I believe it's in Entre-deux-Mers, so not even in the Médoc or Saint-Emilion or anywhere else famous, in a region that isn't really well known. On the back label, it actually says this complex blend is the pride of winemaking maestro Pierre Lurton, which kind of sounds like Pierre Lurton, to be honest. I don't know whether I've ever shared this story, but I did an internship in Bordeaux a long time ago, and Pierre Lurton came in with some Chateau Yquem for us to taste. And I had to describe Chateau Yquem to Pierre Lurton in French back then, and my French just wasn't very good. So this was a slightly embarrassing experience, but he was quite nice about it. Wow, this retails for 15 to 20 US dollars, which is a great price, I think. I mean, this quality level at that price point from Bordeaux, from a famous winemaker, that's just a real bargain. So let's move on to the next wine, number 4, which was one of my favorites. And I thought this was a little bit funky, but funky in a good way. So let's have a look. Of course, a wax capsule, natural wine always needs to have a wax capsule. And this is the 2019 Le Puy, which is kind of a hands-off / natural producer in Bordeaux, a really well-known one. And this is delicious stuff. This brings me back to the episode of Drops of God when Issei has this baller mic drop moment where he blind tastes the wine and he actually gets it right.
Puis 2014. No, 2017.
Okay.
Cuvée Barthélemy.
It's a wine from this estate, but just their top cuvée, the Cuvée Barthélemy. But yeah, great wine, really delicious. And here we have wine number 5. I rated it 92 points, so pretty much on the same level as this and that. But yeah, I thought it was absolutely beautiful. So let's see what it is. Saint-Emilion Grand Cru. Didn't I say Saint-Emilion? I'm pretty sure I said Saint-Emilion here. So this is a good wine. Quite a big, bold wine, 14% alcohol, but really well made, quite delicious. And last but not least, we have wine number 6. I really like this. This was very well structured, quite delicious, quite classic. And it's Chateau Capbern from Saint-Estephe. I don't even know this estate, but this was also really, really good. And those 3, again, around the $30 mark. So there's definitely value in Bordeaux. If you want to find out more about the wines, check out the links in the description. You can find all of the information plus a wine searcher link. Great tasting. Such delicious wines. And this tasting clearly showed that when it comes to quality, the Grand Cru Classés might have the edge, but actually they are not far off other wines that might be half or a third of the price of this. So look for the values in order to really enjoy more wine, cheaper wine. So this tasting really showed that there is clearly a lot of value in Bordeaux. The Grand Cru Classé might have the edge when it comes to quality, but only by a tiny margin. And if you look for value, you can actually find wines that are almost as great, and they might cost just a third of what you pay for Grand Cru Classé. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please like it down here, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is, what is your favorite value Bordeaux wine? Let me know down in the comments. I hope I see you guys again very soon. Until then, stay thirsty.